Is the Steelers' season over? Ron?
Over as far as I think making the playoffs and having a chance to win a Super Bowl. I wrote about this for tomorrow. I think this whole season now comes down to Kenny Pickett's development. Is this going to make him better for next year? Is he going to show for sure that he's the guy? I think Tomlin's non-losing season streak is over. 2-5, they'd have to go 7-3 in the last 10 to finish 9-8. I just don't see it. So I guess to answer your question, is the season over? At least from a playoff standpoint, in my mind, it is, Bob.
I would say from a playoff point of view, yes, I would agree with that. Just because the odds of going 7-3 with a rookie quarterback and looming issues with play calling, I think that can be insurmountable. But to me, I'll look at this at the end, probably as saying, okay, what do they have to build around? And they certainly have a dynamic defense potentially with three guys. The problem is wasting a year like this or wasting previous years with those guys in the fold, and they're not getting any younger either. So, I think it's just be a really difficult hurdle, Joe, to come from 2-5 to get to the playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like that a couple weeks ago. Really, almost from the time Pickett went in, that the season from that point on was going to be about his development. I think we spoke about that this is now about how Pickett develops because they never really had a chance to win a championship, right? But if we're talking simply playoffs, is it over? I'm not willing to say yes to that question just yet, but it's pretty darn close. Like if you don't beat Philly and you're 2-6, we all thought if they're 3-5 going into the bye, that wasn't a horrible place to be, given the schedule from there on. So I would say if they upset Philly, then it's still a season as far as getting to the playoffs go, if that's the definition of a season, if you're in contention for a playoff spot. But it's getting real dark, Folsey, real dark.
Yeah, for my money, I think the season, if we're talking about playoffs and stuff like that, I think the season has been over for the past 3 weeks now. Whenever they got totally, I mean, I know it's Buffalo, but whenever they weren't even in the same league as the Buffalo Bills, that's when I knew, okay, even if this team does make the playoffs, we're in for one of these appearances again against either Kansas City or Buffalo, where they get their doors blown off of them. So I think it hasn't been about wins and losses for the past few weeks. It's all about Kenny Pickett's development.
And then maybe beating Tampa gives you a little bit of hope, but now that turns out to look like not such a great win. How about Tampa Bay and what Brady's doing? You talk about an offense that can't score. They can't score. What did they get, 3 points yesterday? I mean, that doesn't look like such a great win now, does it?
No, it truly doesn't. And the one over Cincinnati, I mean, they had a backup long snapper or you lose that game.
It's mostly fluky, most of that game.
Yeah. On the other hand, the Steelers have been in these games, and if Pickett does get better, if that's the bar, Bob, and if he does get better, then they're going to start winning some of these close games, and they have many winnable games left.
Yeah, they do. And they should have guys who they look to right now and say, I'm going to make sure these guys are the playmakers moving forward. I think if you look at the numbers, Ron, you have them in front of you. I don't. But Pickens and Freiermuth, they were targeted 14, 16, something like that. There was only one that was incomplete, and it was deflected away from Freiermuth. I mean, they were good, and they are the two guys I look to as guys who will make a difference and become regular contributors, and they need more from other guys around them.
Freiermuth was targeted 9 times, 8 catches for 75 yards. Pickens was targeted 6 times, had all 6 catches, 61 yards, including the touchdown. His first touchdown of the season, and only the second by a wide receiver. Now we're 7 games into the season, and they only have a wide receiver with 2 touchdowns. That, to me, just speaks volumes about the offense.
Would it be best then, in the end, to go, 4-13?
Yes.
I mean, I think isn't that a yes at this point? Wouldn't it be great for 1 year, if you're going to miss out anyway, to have the 5th pick in the draft and in every subsequent round? Why not just bite and I'm not saying you intentionally lose games. I'm just saying, in the end, is that what is best for this franchise?
How about the trade deadline coming up? Do you think of moving some guys?
See, that's what I brought up earlier.
I know
think
the
that's
Claypool
legitimate.
thing, November 1st, they'll have the Eagles game, in the books by then. If they're 2-6, do you think of moving, a Claypool, for instance? Somebody else, I don't know who else. I'm not moving T.J. Watt, but somebody like that, would you consider moving?
They just don't have any Christian McCaffreys who are going to bring a big ton of anything, I don't think, no matter who you trade. And that includes Claypool or Deontay Johnson or anyone else. What are you going to get realistically for any of those guys? And Ron, I do think it is something they should consider where they are if that's the case. But I also think, to your question, Joe, about 4-13, yeah, okay, fine if it ends up that way. But part of doing well in the NFL is also having a culture of winning and knowing how to win games. If they're in a position where they got a bunch of young people on the field and they're making plays, you let them play. And whatever the record is, the record is. It doesn't matter if you have the 5th or 9th pick. If you can't draft better, then you're still going to make mistakes. My point is they got to play to win these games. All of them do.
Oh, yeah. No, I'm not saying the people on the field tank, and it's not really like baseball where you
Right.
can or
hockey.
See, baseball, you can always, in the NBA, you can always bring the younger guys in knowing that they're not any good. Here they're already playing their younger guy. I mean, who would, you can't get away with, we're not going to play Minka in the final 5 games because we're tanking type thing.
Right.
You know what I mean?
No, I know. It's easier.
So, yeah, of course, they should
for
play
sure.
to win. I definitely agree with that. You have to. You can't tank on the field. But I think they're bad enough where it's possible they could go. I'm just saying that would be the best thing. It would be the best thing in the end. Like if I were a Steeler fan,
It is, but
if
you
I
have to
could
make good
sign
on
up
that
for
pick
that
too,
now.
though.
Well, of course you do.
How about if you don't?
Would you like to have the number 1 pick?
Again,
I would.
Okay, here's an
But yes,
interesting
you have to
scenario.
make good on it. That goes without saying.
No, number 1 pick would incorporate then. See, to me, if my eyes light up, if I had the number 1 pick, I'd be interested in trading it. If you believe Kenny Pickett's your quarterback, there are going to be some good quarterbacks out there. Then and only then would I look at that and say, this is what I want. I can get 2 2s, 2 3s, maybe a flip 1, and then because I won't need a quarterback, and how many teams will? Or you may say, you know what? I've seen enough here, and if quarterback's that important, draft another one.
But
and
that's
play games.
yes, that's the thing, Bob. The 4-13 scenario is only best case scenario, I think, if you still feel good about Kenny Pickett. If you still find out that he's your future quarterback, because if you don't, then it opens up a whole nother world of problems.
Ron?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not looking to draft a quarterback. I hope it doesn't come to that. I would be interested in a trade possibility as well. At that point, if you have a high pick, because somebody's going to want a quarterback back then. But it's still determined. We need to see Pickett play more to determine if they do think he is the guy.
I'll say this much. While I'm not willing to write off the season yet, if there were a transformational player at the top of this draft, a Peyton Manning, even a Trevor Lawrence when he came out,
Right.
somebody like that, like an obvious number 1 pick
If
quarterback,
it's your most important
you'd
position
almost
on the
have
board
to do
in
it
your
unless
team,
unless Pickett lit it up. I don't look at C.J. Stroud as that guy, Ron. But can you imagine if this was a year where you had that obvious transformational quarterback at the top of the draft? Because I will say this, it's more realistic right now to talk about the Steelers as having the number 1 pick than it is to talk about them as a playoff team.
That's exactly what I wrote for tomorrow, saying that exact same thing. They are more likely to get the number 1 pick than make the playoffs. Absolutely, Joe. But again, I hope it doesn't come to the fact that you have to draft a quarterback number 1 2 years in a row.
No, I'm not saying that. But if it's a if there were a transformational quarterback available, then you almost have to take him. You know, if Peyton Manning was available at the top of this draft, you'd have to take him.
Yeah,
I
but
think.
Ryan Leaf was considered that type of quarterback too. It was halfway. Peyton Manning or Ryan Leaf, when they come out, I think they went 1-2. You never know what these guys are going to be like. I'm just hoping it turns out to be Pickett. But I'm with you. If you think you're convinced that somebody's can't miss, you got to go for him.
What if Joe Burrow were available at the top of this draft?
Yeah,
If
there
it's
you
the
go.
most important position,
That's an interesting
then
call
you'd have
right
to
there.
say, wait a minute, I could stockpile pretty good quarterbacks here. It would help me out later. I don't know. There are a lot of different things you can think
What
about
did
at that point.
what did Burrow throw for yesterday? Like almost
480.
500 yards,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
He
yeah.
is really starting to find his game, isn't he?
I'll
But
say.
didn't Jamar Chase get hurt though? I don't know how serious that was. Did anybody hear?
I didn't hear.
I don't know that it's serious because I think we would have heard that by now. But he did get banged up. But I mean, if you discount, they should have won. The Bengals should be 6-1 right now. The opener, that was a win. All he had to do was make a kick. And they also had another game where they blew, I thought, based on how they played. So very interesting. They're getting steam right now. They're going to be hard to catch.
John Elway at the top of the 83 draft, but Ron's point is well taken. I mean, look at the number 1 picks overall through history. You also have Vinny Testaverde mixed in there, Steve Bartkowski mixed in there. Troy Aikman was a pretty nice pick. Jeff George was the number 1 pick overall. Drew Bledsoe, Peyton Manning, Tim Couch was the number 1 pick. But I'm saying, man,
you never know.
if you had one of these guys that everybody agreed, like some of these guys were taken number 1 overall that nobody was saying, wow, this guy's going to change the game of football, like David Carr was taken number 1 overall. But, man, would it be something if you had that kind of guy available. At the top of the draft, though, Bob, I wouldn't trade the pick. I think there's guys at the top of this draft that the Steelers could get an absolute stud, and then you just keep picking. First in every round.
I'm not discounting anything. I'm just saying if there's somebody there that you like, that's one thing. If there's somebody there that you really don't need, and
It's an option.
Yeah,
It's an option,
You can
yes.
trade, and you'll get a lot. A lot of people would love to move up to number 1, but you got to make them pay for it if that's the case.
Absolutely. So is the season over? We're pretty much are all saying if it ain't, it's getting real close to it.
I think it is.
Well, you asked about trade deadline. I'm not trading Chase Claypool. No, because if the season's about getting the most I can out of Pickett, I want him to have all his weapons. Chase Claypool's still young. I want to go elsewhere in the draft. I don't want to keep chasing receiver. And if one of these other guys gets hurt, I have Claypool on hand and ready to play. And I wouldn't even write off the idea of signing Claypool. He's not going to be making $100 million. They don't have to pay a quarterback. They could sign him to a 2-year deal.
Give him a
3-year
Juju deal.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
So I want him around for Pickett's sake, Ron, because I don't see that you're going to break the bank in the return for him anyway.
Well, if he goes on to have a pretty good year with Pickett, he's going to want to be paid. He's going to want at least Deontay Johnson money, right? If you don't want to trade Claypool, would you trade Deontay? I mean, if you're going to look into if you're 2-6 going into the trade deadline, I would definitely consider trading one of them.
No, I wouldn't, because I want Pickett to go into next season with 3 weapons on the outside, and then I can make my decision later on. Will I lose Claypool, get a compensatory pick, trade him at the deadline next year if we stink again, if I'm the Steelers thinking that? I want Pickett to have all his weapons. How about you, Bob?
Yeah, if they believe that he's going to be a weapon.
Do you believe he's going to be a weapon?
Well, I thought I was very, I said coming into the season, I thought he was going to have a big year. I did. I believed it. And I saw last week an indication that he was going to make some big plays in clutch times. It just hasn't been enough for me. He's a physical guy. He should win just about every ball that you throw in those situations. So, do I still think he can be? Yes. Am I hopeful?
Would you trade him?
Again, I don't think you're going to get the offer that makes a difference. And if you get a 4th or 5th round, what are you really doing?
I would love to see Chase Claypool in an offense that isn't under the helm of Matt Canada.
Look at Juju Smith-Schuster
I
for
was
an
just going
example.
to say that.
Yeah.
Did you see what he did yesterday?
2 weeks in a row now.
Two 100-yard games in a row. He was dynamic yesterday.
But again, that goes to show you what a play caller can do to a playmaker.
Exactly.
I believe everything that Juju has said since he got there, that he learned more about offense in 10 minutes. Well, I'm exaggerating even for him, 10 minutes with Andy Reid than he did here in his whole career. Juju's proving that he might still be a number 1 receiver. See what he did yesterday?
He's going to
after
get
last
over
week?
1,000 yards on the year.
Good for him.